the Kayak Fishing Obsessed podcast. We'll be sitting down with a fresh guest each week. Someone who shares the same kayak fishing passion that runs through our veins. We're talking kayak anglers, kayak companies, lure experts. Heck, anyone who's got a story to tell about landing the big ones from a kayak. We're setting our sights on becoming the #1 kayak fishing podcast in the world. You'll get a chuckle, a grin, and hey, maybe even a belly laugh. Because we believe in the power of humor. But above all, we're here to educate and inspire. So, whether you're a seasoned kayak angler or just dipping your toes into this exhilarating world, join us on the Kayak Fishing Obsessed podcast. It's time to reel in adventure, camaraderie, and the joy of the catch. Here's your host, Darren Wendell.
Hey, you fish freaks. Welcome to episode number 94 of the Kayak Fishing Obsessed podcast with my co-host, Seth. How you doing, brother?
What's up, man? I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, The show's proudly sponsored by KBF, and I would go through my long spiel of how you should sign up for the monthly challenges, but to be honest with you, I don't want to talk about that because I'm getting beat right now, and I'm not happy about it. It's freaking cold.
I heard it was chilly up there.
19 degrees on the water this morning. I lasted 2 hours.
Yeah.
I think I caught a 19, but all the rest were dinks. But it's where ice on your, you get ice in your eyelets. It's a little wild. It was windy.
Yeah, it was a brisk like 70 down here today. I was like, ooh, I need a sweater, like sweater weather down here in Florida.
The reason I'm not going into the whole KBF thing, because we have the founder of KBF on tonight, Chad Hoover. We're going to be talking about a few things. We're going to be talking about the best dang charter captain that ever lived. We're going to talk about potentially kayak fishing 2 motors. We're going to talk about, I don't want to be tone deaf stuff that's out there and it's happening right now, right? Let's talk about the no information rule. And then let's talk about kind of the future of kayak design, where we're checking sees that swinging back and forth. But instead of saying what we're going to talk about, Chad, welcome to the show, brother. How you doing?
Pretty good.
Oh,
so
goodness.
first of all,
you got that grin on your face.
Yeah,
you're getting ready to rip. He's ready.
If you lasted 2 hours and 19 degrees, you lasted about an hour and 45 minutes longer than I would have lasted. You have eyelets on your shoes, not on your fishing rod. Those things on your fishing rod are called guides.
Eyelets, guides, eyelets.
Nice.
And
oh my gosh.
I just got to say that when you're in the green room and you're looking at your logo, and I don't want to ruin this logo for you, not that you'll care, but your avatar or graphic or whatever it is looks like Ross from Friends and Andrew Tate had a baby. So
what are you talking about?
if you look at Andrew
the KFO
Tate,
logo or my Wendell Fishing logo?
the Kayak Fishing Obsessed logo of you, it looks like Ross from Friends and Andrew Tate had a baby, and that person became a kayak fisherman. So
I can see that. Now that you say that, Chad, I see that. Yeah.
No, now I can't unsee it. That's the problem. Thank you, Chad. Appreciate that one.
You're welcome. Andrew Tate and Ross, Friends and toxic masculinity.
Well, let's hop into this, Chad. Thanks for hopping on tonight. I know you got a hard stop here in about an hour, so we're going to have to condense. But usually we could go. I think we've gone for 2 hours before, but
I think it's a good thing. It forces us to
stay focused. We got 4 topics tonight, and so we get each one about 10-15 minutes, and we'll go from there. I am curious though. Chad and I talk probably a few times a week, and we had a brief conversation. Really, hey, pause that. Talk about that on the podcast this upcoming week. And so if you're live and have eyes and look at your phone, I'm sure everyone has seen the viral video, millions and millions and millions of views, thousands and thousands of comments about Brock Horner, the charter captain, just boarding another vessel. And Chad, as someone who was in the Navy, maritime law, Florida, down south, all those things, what did you see in that video? Your takeaway, because he was arrested on felony, and that's not even the end of it, right? The Coast Guard hasn't even done their thing yet. the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation, they haven't even done their own investigation yet. And the was it Punta Gorda or whatever it is, police department could result in additional charges as well. And so we're just at the precipice of the beginning of this thing. What's going to happen? And for those maybe who haven't seen it, Chad, let's walk us through really quick kind of what happened and your deduction of what are people missing.
So I've watched kind of all sides of it. I've got some friends with FWC. And like you said, after being in the Navy for 20 years, I've got some friends that are captains in the Coast Guard that are not Coast Guard captains, meaning you're not a civilian holding a maritime license to operate as a captain, but actual Coast Guard captains. And so made a few phone calls. And I think the thing that's the takeaway for me, well, I'm going to take two opposing positions to what's out there. One, the kid who they refer to repeatedly as the victim really isn't a kid. He's a 23-year-old man. And to a certain extent, he put himself in a man's position by the bro and the FU and the FU and the MFer and all that other stuff, and became a lot less man once old boy boarded his boat. So there is this thing and this stand your ground law in Florida, but there's also this just common man law in the South, of which Florida is a part. That's like, FAFO. And so to a certain extent, he just kept on running his mouth. And if you go back and watch the whole video, he's like, not rising to the occasion of what the captain ultimately did, what this guy Brock ultimately did. Definitely didn't warrant it, and I'm not justifying it. What I'm saying is he wasn't really a kid, and he wasn't really just sitting there, and the guy just drove up and jumped on his boat. He was jacking his jaw. He was running his mouth. Could have been worse is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The big takeaway from me is the people who are getting all the grief for not doing anything is crazy, because that guy was obviously on tilt, and he's the captain. Right? He's the captain of the vessel. You've hired him. And unless you're going to take over the vessel, you're kind of at his mercy to be, which then leads into my third point. Right? So I don't think that the people on the boat should have
been
being targeted like they are. But that's the internet. Right? Realistically, one of them should have said, come on, bro, calm down. Let's go fishing. Or how about this? Hey, dude, we're paying you for a charter to fish, not to argue with this dude. Let's go. Right? Real simple diffusing of the situation. And he's not a cheap charter captain. He's $1,500 to $1,800 a day. So if you're spending 15, 20, 30 minutes arguing with some clown, you're costing
hundreds of dollars. Yeah.
As a paying client. So, but the part to me that stood out as a guy who's spent a lot of time, kind of in this world is, not just that he boarded the kid's boat, but he left his boat. You are the captain of your vessel. You left your vessel with clients on it, uncaptained. You then said, bring my boat over here. So you then directed one of your guys to become the captain for the other people on board, which is gross negligence. So the Coast Guard's going to pull his captain's license. FWC is never going to let him get a guide permit again. It's just one of those things, right? His livelihood and that bubble is pretty well gone. He has a retail construction or a commercial construction business as well, residential and commercial construction business, for which he got most of his marketing from doing the fishing stuff and partnering with YouTubers and TV show hosts and things like that. He was a pretty well-known dude. I didn't know him, but everybody that I know other than him knows him, if that makes sense, prior to this incident. So, and
he was what I heard, he was a good captain. Like
very acclaimed captain. Several tarpon rodeo championships and awards and things like that. And so I don't know if it rises to his self-proclamation of the best effing captain in the world. And
no, he's the best. He said it.
All of that. But definitely one of the best, regardless of how you work it. Kids anchored on the side of the channel without their anchor lights on. Okay, what were you going to do? Because the guys are against the pylons. So if they don't have their anchor lights on, are you saying you were going to run into the pylon anyway? I mean, the whole thing's just silly. As a guy who's been through some significant PTSD related type stuff, I can understand playing that game, but that's beyond that. There's something else going on there. There's a recurring pattern of being able to get away with it, from what I've heard, as a kind of a bully and an aggressive dude. And realistically, the other side you got to look at is that kid and him had got into it a couple of other times, which explains the camera. The kid went out there kind of like some of these people that go to golf courses, or they pull up on a dock that's got a known Karen,
right?
Get that viral video. So to a certain extent, that kid planned on being there waiting on that guy, had the camera rolling, and got what he got, which, hey, good on him, I guess. But he could have just as easily gotten hurt and gotten drowned. And so this chasing viral content for the sake of triggering people is going to end up, it's already several times ended up very poor, very deadly. Up in Nashville not too long ago, they had one of the YouTube kids pulled a prank by breaking out a fake butcher's knife, and the guy pulled a gun on him and shot him twice in the chest. So
really did not hear that.
You just got to stop messing with people. And this trend of triggering people for the sake of content, it's just going to get to where it ends worse and worse and worse, down the road. So,
I'm surprised at those videos where like a ball rolls out and then the clown steps out in like a dark alley. I was like, how is someone not shot dead yet? Like
right.
4 or 5 times over.
Yeah,
like,
it's coming.
I mean, it's wild to me. And yeah, it seems just to continue to get worse, and more people are like, I don't know, they watch a video like this, like, hey, I might start carrying. I mean, crazy stuff like this happens, even though it's not the norm. It starts to feel like the norm when that's what goes viral every single time. So you think his captain's license gets pulled? His business is already.
I mean, he left his vessel.
Yeah.
To board another vessel in a fit of rage. Aside from what he did with the kid, he left his clients on the vessel without, supervision, which is your job as a charter captain. Is you're there to make sure that their health and well-being is the number one priority, right? You're not doing that if you jump off your boat. You're just not.
It's kind of a bummer for something that's what you've been doing for 15 years, and you're not gonna be able to do it anymore. And that's a part of Florida
the biggest thing that I saw in the video is the kid's behind the console. When he first jumps on the boat, if that kid guns it, he's in the water. Simple, real simple. When he first jumps on that gunnel, if that kid guns it, he's in the water, probably going to hit his head on his boat. And again, now you've left your vessel and you've left your clients in a jeopardized position. They probably don't even know where they're at. They don't know how to run the GPS. They don't know how to run that boat. They don't know how to safely navigate. You know what I mean? You've jeopardized. And I know people are going to think this is being blown out of proportion, but no, in that part of Florida, stuff can get treacherous real quick. You potentially jeopardize the lives of your clients by putting yourselves in harm's way to bully a kid. If that kid guns that boat at the right time, he's out of the boat, probably hitting his head on his own boat, knocking himself out, and it's a way worse situation. Or he throws the kid out the boat. The kid throws him out the boat, and the current sweeps him, and now his clients have to rescue him, which is not their job. His job is to take care of them, not the other way around. You know what I mean? So
we know how it ended. Like, how did he just eventually? Because I don't know if I didn't see the full clip.
The kid took him back. The kid took him back to his boat. He got back on the boat. They kept jacking their jaws a little bit, and then they parted ways.
Yeah.
Then the kid drove straight home. The kid drove straight home, not traumatized, not worried about his mental health like they're doing now. He's going to need years of therapy, and went straight to upload the video.
Edited that mother as fast as he could.
That goes back to my other point. You know what I mean? He didn't have his therapist look it over and say, hey, or call the police or say, hey, he said, upload. Oh, yeah, this is going to go viral. Good for him.
Yeah. All right, let's switch gears. Joey, well, real quick, Seth, you live down there in Florida. Of course, you've had any conversations or anything to add?
I'll tell you one thing. If someone tries to board my boat, they will fall in the water right away. They will not get 2 feet on my kayak, and they will fall directly in the water. So I ain't worried about it. No, I haven't really run into anything. I'm sure the boat fishermen are a little bit more chattier, than the kayak anglers. And I don't think the boat fishermen really pay much attention to me on the kayak. I'll just go jack those fish right in front of them. But I think the competitive anglers, and obviously I'm not around charter boats very often, but I haven't run into much of that. But it's Florida, man. People are crazy down here. It's Florida, man, for a reason. They're wild. Something about the swamps and the gators and backwoods. Yeah, it's a little wild down here. I have someone over here in the chat. It was Michael Bradley. He asked if by Florida law would the kid be justified to use any lethal force. I don't know the answer. 100%.
150,000%. He could have double tapped him right in the chest as soon as his foot touched the gunnel. He wouldn't even have had to truly feel threatened. Florida is a 100% castle law, stand your ground state. No debate. Video would have been his it would have basically, they would have been like, oh yeah, cool.
Exonerated. Yeah.
He'd have been exonerated. There'd have been no issues. They would have looked at the video. They would have said, okay, let's check your firearm. Oh, cool. Looks good. You might want to clean that slide.
And that's as soon as that individual boarded the boat, his boat. Yeah.
Especially after the threat, after saying everybody on my boat knows I'm a bad, you're making all of these prefaces to establish the premise that you're dangerous. That was the biggest problem, is all those statements he made about how dangerous he is, war veteran, all that other stuff. Why are you saying that other than to quantify that you're dangerous? Step on the boat, blow his back out. Dude could have blew his back out. They would have said, nah, sorry for your loss.
Yeah, wild.
It's wild. All right, we'll switch gears. We're going to rip through tonight. So, Chad, you and I were briefly talking about kayak fishing when it comes to two motors. There's been a lot of back and forth. Some people want it, some people don't. You've been talking about this for a long time. So unpack for people and like, well, Darren, what the crap are you talking about? What I'm talking about when I say two motors on a fishing kayak.
So it's kind of funny that I was the first guy, like legitimately putting motors on kayaks. And I was the first person getting arrows in the back for being the guy that's putting motors on kayaks. There's so many guys right now that are sponsored by motor companies that are motoring around that were very critical of motors in the beginning. That just kind of makes me laugh. But the problem that we run into with the two motor issue is that with two motors comes the outfitting for two motors, comes the weight of the two motors, comes the weight of the batteries for the two motors, comes with all of that extra stuff. And none of the manufacturers are coming out and truly rating them for two motors. They're not rating them for really anything. And because there's so much ambiguity in how weight capacities and horsepower ratings and ratings in general are done within the kayak fishing community, when I vet it to go to an insurance company to put the risk metrics together, we're talking about, must have a PFD on, must comply with watercraft regulations. My rules must require that they adhere to manufacturer standards and that they adhere to PFD requirement of wear, even if that's not the state threshold, right? So when you get into saying, okay, fine, you can do two motors, that works great for a Titan X, a Hobie Pro Angler in most cases, a New Canoe Unlimited in most cases, a bona fide PWR in most cases, an SS 127 in some cases, an Old Town Autopilot in probably most cases, definitely the 136, maybe not the 120. The XTR, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, totally rated. And, so what you run into is the understanding of knowing that the general propensity is for anglers to overload their boats. Mm-hmm. And then if you kick that door open even more to where you say, hey, now two motors are allowed, are you making it to where they need to have that second motor to be competitive, just like people feel like they have to have a first motor to be competitive now? And are you therefore incentivizing them to exceed the manufacturer's recommended ratings, which if you go look at the way that we did the ratings, we rated it at 3 horsepower, 155 foot-pounds. And that was the maximum amount of power that any fishing kayak in the game could handle back then. And so now, have we moved the bar? Absolutely. The problem is we've moved the bar, and there's some boats that can handle it. But when you just say now you can use 2 motors, you're going to have some knucklehead out there on a Sun Dolphin, with an XI3 on the front and a Torpedo on the back, or or like some of those entry level Alibaba boats with a battery in the front compartment and a bow mount and a battery in the back with a NK300 and all their graph and bower and tackle and themselves. And it's generally that I find the people with the least capable craft are the ones that would most likely overload it.
Right.
Now, we can play the game of angler responsibility and all that other stuff. And I do think that ultimately we do that already. And it's going to come down to that. I've seriously considered and took it before my advisory board and took it before my community. Hey, what about 2 motors, can't exceed manufacturer's recommended, and only use one at a time? You know what the number one question is? Hey, man, what's the manufacturer's recommended for my boat? Well, now you want me to make that recommendation for you because the manufacturer doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So now I go down this slippery slope of playing the sanctioning body that is rating watercraft. And
Chad told me.
If little Seth goes out there and kills himself and told his wife, oh, baby, no, KBF said it's good to go. And then he washes up on the beach. She's crying on the news. Oh, he wouldn't have done it if Chad Hoover didn't say it was okay. You know what I mean? And then now, everything I've worked for is gone. And,
it's pretty much Chad's fault.
Miss Taylor now owns everything. You know what I mean?
That's right. Yeah. Good plan.
It's a little bit of litigiousness. It's also a lot of practicality. I don't think that the lion's share of boats are capable of it.
Sure.
I don't even think the vast majority are. I think we're more in the world of there's a few isolated instances where these watercraft are capable enough. Now, are those watercraft becoming a predominance of the people that would compete? Possibly. But the question is, do we cut off the bottom end of the people coming in to compete if that's the standard for which they have to compete? And that's the most compelling question for me, because I could potentially solve all the other problems. I could potentially twist the manufacturer's arms. I could potentially play that game. But if you say 2 motors are allowed, you're going to have 2 motors to be competitive. Now it's not just the cost of the 2 motors and the batteries for the 2 motors. It's the upgrade to the watercraft that can carry them, probably needing a trailer because a 2-motor capable watercraft is one of the heavier ones, especially once you get it fully rigged with the 2-motor stuff. So it's not a simple question of the 2 motors on the kayak once it's on the water. And I think that I'll break my arm patting myself on the back. I think I do a better job of that part than most people because I have to and because I've been around the longest. But that's the part where we are right now. I've considered allowing 2 motors, saying it's up to you, you're on your own, blah, 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 for the virtual stuff. Say, but for the championships and the live events, you got to go back to the 2-motor rule.
Yep.
But also when you're fishing solo for a month is probably where you're putting yourself in the most in harm's way. But you're a captain of your own vessel. You're in charge of your own. You're in charge of your own. Your own dominion. You're responsible for yourself. But I still have to think about where does that turn the ship for where we are, and does it create a big divide between the haves and the have-nots, which we'll get back into again with the information rule thing. So I think we're a ways away from it. I don't think it's going to be one of those things where one organization, whether it's KBF or Bass or TKS or somebody else, kind of breaks ranks and goes and does it. I think it's going to be an ongoing conversation. And I think about the time that the groundswell gets to the point where you can't ignore it anymore will be the tipping point when it probably finally does happen.
Yeah. Hey everyone, we have 127 live right now. If you could hit that like button, get some juice after this is all said and done. Chad, who's asking you? I mean, you get a lot of requests for this. Is it overwhelming?
Every day. Every day.
Are you really? I
Every
could
day.
barely afford the one motor I have, let alone
Every
the
day.
batteries. That's the same amount.
Twice today.
Twice the day.
Twice today. Literally, before I buy the watercraft that I'm thinking about, are you going to allow 2 motors? I get that a lot.
Really?
What's the common argument as to why they feel it's necessary?
Well, I want to use the back motor to get where I'm going and cover water and be faster. But then when I get there, I want to put the trolling motor down for spot lock.
So what they're looking at, what, like a mile or two
I'm
per
like,
hour? Like
get an anchor motor. Oh no, it's almost double.
Oh, is it? It's like 7-8 or something.
A good stern mounted motor no, because your average bow mount ain't 4.5. You know what I mean? There's a couple of bow mounts that are. Your average bow mount's 2.5 to 3.5, somewhere in there. There's a couple that'll hit that upper 3s and into 4s. You know, the power pole move, which is like $5,000, that thing will get up there into the high 5s. But no, it's the range, it's the covering water, it's the more efficient covering water so that you don't have to have as big a battery. And then, what we don't think about a lot of times as kayak anglers is trolling motors are not meant to be primary propulsion. They're meant to be intermittent movement of the boat once it gets to where it's going. And It's a pull motor versus a push motor. So when guys put that trolling motor on high and just stand on it, and they do that for weeks or months, that trolling motor is getting more hours on it and more time on it in 6 weeks than it would in a year and a half with a bass fisherman. You know what I mean? A boat fisherman. The other problem is the wiring is not designed for sustained high current operation where you've got that jammed down on high just the whole time for an hour and a half for runs, because it's designed more for incremental movements and small movements and things like that. Boat control, not so much just being on steady high, And to me, the big 3 are weight, excessive weight, imbalance of the watercraft for potential capsizing, and now you've got a problem. And then the other one is fire hazard. With all that extra electrical, with that high current situation, you run into the scenarios where we've had the most kayak fires over the years, which is poorly wired or improperly wired trolling motors.
That's something you don't hear about too often. Kayak fires.
Oh, they happen.
That happen
a lot, way more than you think. It's one of those things where it's kind of like shit in your pants. It happens more than you think, but nobody wants to admit it when it happens. So therefore, you don't think it's as big a deal. Does that make sense?
No. I can't see that one.
Typically not something you want to share with people. Hey, I DIY wired my kayak and I caught it on fire.
Near burnt it up.
Yeah, exactly. Near died.
I can tell you this. I know a super elite kayak fishing pro, super elite, like one of the best in the game, has burned his motor up twice and called me on it in a tournament. And you don't know about it. And I'm not going to tell you about it, but I'm just saying there's people at really high levels that have caught their shit on fire and damn near burnt their boat up. Even
number one reason,
improper wiring, underrated wire for the or connectors. Like I'll give you an example. The Old Town connector on the original Sportsman, I don't know if they changed it since then. The connector itself is rated for the middle band of use of that motor, but if you look at the power arc of that motor on high for a long period of time, that motor that comes in that boat exceeds the rating for the connector that comes in the boat. Little stuff like that, you know what I mean? That's just like, whoo, but it's the one that's rated for that motor for a boat, not thinking about the fact that on a kayak, you're using it as your primary propulsion. So it needs to be
that happened to one of our teammates. We went out on the knucklehead.
Yeah. He said he was smelling something burning.
Yeah, he smelled something burning. He burned it out. It was his primary.
Yeah.
Now I heard this somewhere, Chad. I don't know where I heard it, so it could be wrong. But the new Wilderness kayak that came out, doesn't have the right wiring or underwiring. You hear anything about that? Or
I'm going to plead the opposite of the fifth, where I don't get put on the record saying something that I shouldn't say. Is that the opposite of the fifth? I'm going to plead the 10th.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
You're
I think that's how it works.
plead the 20th.
I'm not going on record to say one way or another whether or not I've heard that, or that if I've heard it, if the people that I heard it from are credible. So I gotta let you guys do your own research.
So you heard it.
I will confirm that I have heard it.
Yeah.
But I have not confirmed it. So therefore I don't like to weigh in as a subject matter expert on something that I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, you haven't had eyes on it, is what you're saying.
Right.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so three times today I've been asked about dual motors. 2 of the 3 times they wanted me to say whether or not it was going to be allowed before the end of the year, so they knew which kayak they wanted to buy.
Jeez.
Today.
That's wild.
Today. Probably get it. If I don't get it every day, I'll get 3 or 4 in a day, so it averages out to at least once a day. But there's days that 10, 15 people hit me up about it.
So if you were to make that decision, you would literally have to go to your insurance company for KBF.
Or I would have to go back to my legal team.
Right, and rewrite
get the waiver
responsibility. Right,
a lot more comprehensive around the part of accepting responsibility for your boat. Could we just go and try it? Absolutely. If it was universal, where all the series did it, to where it was a reasonable expectation across the board, shared responsibility for the perception and all that other stuff, it would be easier. But to be that one series that steps out there and does it, other than some of your local or even some of your kind of a little bit bigger than local regional trails are doing it uneventfully. But the question is, what happens when it's eventful? You know what I mean? What happens when the angler catches their boat on fire and has a thermal runaway and sinks their boat, and Coast Guard has to rescue them, and they say, yeah, it's because my boat caught on fire. Where's your fire extinguisher? I don't have to have one. I don't have it trap fuel. Well, why did it catch on fire? Oh, my electrical.
Yep, I hear you. Ruben Cooler Lid says, first thing I upgraded on my kayak, I updated the motor and the battery connectors. And he says, YouTube gives people a false sense of handyman skills.
Yes, it does. 100%.
It truly does. And not only do you got double motors, what about you got Matthew Weimer over here? What about those double power pole setups on kayaks we have now, the Talons?
Those things don't use a lot of power.
I'm just saying the weight.
Yeah, I might be putting a double power pole on my XTR, but that boat's got the weight capacity.
Sure. It's in the 700s, isn't it?
What's that?
It's in the 700s. Yeah. 750.
Minus the 150 of the boat. So 600 usable. Yeah. So that's the other thing people forget, is that the vast majority of manufacturers, the weight limit is how much that boat can float, including itself. It's got to float itself as well,
Deduct that right off the bat.
There's a couple companies that don't do it that way, and they say that. Old Town is one of them that has usable capacity on their website. I like that. I applaud that. I almost think that should be the standard. Do
they actually share what usable capacity means, or are they going to just assume that you know what it means? Yeah, so you have to actually do a little research. Usable capacity? What do you mean usable versus non-usable? All right, Seth, before we move on for this one, we have 153 live right now. This is on fire.
Yeah, if you just want to increase that weight capacity, just get a couple pieces of styrofoam, just throw it in there, and then it adds an extra. I think it's like 20 pounds of weight capacity per block of styrofoam you just shove in there. I'm totally
kidding. He's baiting you, Chad. I'm just smiling.
He's shaking his head. He's like,
baiting you.
No, don't do it.
Now, I will say this. I am a big fan of water displacement, meaning get these oversized pool noodles. And for any internal capacity of your boat you're not going to use, cut them up and shove them in there. So that way, if you do spring a leak or if you do start to take on water, every bit of space that is displaced by something that will not absorb water, airbags, dry bags. We used to take the inflatable exercise balls, shove them back in the boat, pump them up, disconnect them. So they were taking up as much space as possible for offshore fishing. And yeah, but the big pool noodles, the like 6-incher ones, run down the side. It'll blow your mind how much water that can displace. And when you're talking 8 pounds a gallon and you're bringing on hundreds of gallons of water. I went fishing with a really good friend of mine, long time kayak fishing pioneer, come off the water the other day. And he was like, "Hey, can you back the boat down a little bit so it can drain?" It blew my mind how long this boat drained water. I was like,
drain? What is going on?
It took on a little water.
A little?
A little. Yeah. 35 gallons, something like that.
little bit.
200.
What was the reason?
There's a known situation in and around one part of that boat that if you do a certain thing, it takes on water. So yeah, it took on water in that said range, and that person knew about it and anticipated it, prepares for it, and deals with it. So not exactly how I want to do it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't want anything leaking or super wet when I get off the water, other than my pants legs if I gotta wait in the water unloading my thing, or maybe something waiting on me at home. But other than that, I don't want anything, you know.
I mean, all I wanted to look inside the hatch of my Bonafide is bone dry. That's what I want to see, unless the waves were high and it was raining that day.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. All right, I got a question here from Yakalope. A little off. We're doing some transition questions here. Can I use my canoe in a kayak tournament?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if I knew that one.
Yeah. Canoes, kayaks, and SUPs right off the top are all permitted.
Okay.
SUPs, yeah.
Oh, really? You ever had people roll in with a
you want to fish something that's got this much gunnel and no keel and get blown around like a top all day, and you know, the only real advantage a canoe has over other watercraft is weight capacity. If you want to fish out of a canoe, more power to you. I think if somebody loses to somebody in a canoe, the person in the canoe would have beat your brakes off in a kayak. So they were at a disadvantage. 100%.
And we'll come back to Johnny Bennett's question as soon as we get around the no information rule conversation we're going to enter in right now. But is there fear that kayak fishing will outprice itself out of growth? But we'll circle around, and I don't want you to answer that right now, Chad. We'll get to that. We will get to that.
Let me give a preemptive answer.
Okay.
Only if you don't truly believe in capitalism.
All right.
If you truly believe in the principles of America was founded on and capitalism, things just self-right. So only if you truly don't believe in capitalism. Now, we'll get more in specifics when we get a little bit later into the conversation, like you said.
Yeah. Chris Funk said, I had a John boat that leaked so bad if you dropped a fish in it, you catch it again. That's a lot of water, my friend. That's a lot of water. All right, Chad, let's switch the conversation up here to no information rule. There's a lot of conversation with Bassmaster. This rule states essentially 28 days off limits during that time, other than using publicly available information, example, newspaper, internet reports. Competitors cannot solicit, receive, or gather any information via phone, electronic device, or any other means about locating or catching fish on tournament waters. So there we go. Obviously, there's some issues with Scott Martin recently withdrawing himself after a formal protest was submitted. And there's a lot of chatter on the internet about being a rich man's sport. I'm going to now hand that right over to you, Chad. I know you had some thoughts because we've talked about it a little bit earlier today.
The information rule, or the no information rule, is a mandatory requirement in the world of competitive fishing. There's no way around it. Before we had it, it was absolute Wild West. If you think that bass fishing is a rich man's sport now, it truly would be if there was a no information rule. It kind of used to be, because guys that owned construction companies or had just sold their business or whatever, who jumped into fishing, could go out and buy up all this information, and they were at a major competitive advantage. But let me tell you what would actually happen, and I am not speculating. You can get on the internet and argue with yourself if you want to after this is over about this, but you'll just be wasting your breath. Unless that's what you like to do, just argue with yourself. But if you got rid of the no information rule and said it's a free-for-all, kick the door wide open.
Yeah, because some people say it's stupid. I just read it today.
Yeah. Our good buddy Alex thinks it's stupid.
Yep.
But he also fishes for snook, so I don't know what his conversation for, but whatever. That being said,
what would happen
if you had a no information rule? This is not what might happen. This is exactly what would happen. I am going to use a brand name just because this person is the tip of the tongue, just won the Major League Fishing Red Crest. This is not an indictment on this brand, and I'm not saying this brand would do this. I'm going to use a nationally known brand, and I'm going to use a couple of anglers to make this point, but I am not saying this brand or these anglers would do this. I just want that to be clarified. Okay. So if you had
loud and clear.
If you had a no information rule and a brand like, say, Rapala had a couple of hammers like Jacob Wheeler and Dustin Connell, but yet they had 30 up-and-comer pros that were fishing, let's say, the Toyota series, or they were fishing the BFLs, or they're fishing this other series. They could say to their underling pros, hey, guys, listen, need you to head over to Gunnersville for the next 2 weeks, and I need the absolute juice on where they are. And look, I know you feel like this is kind of, serving uphill right now, but when you make it, we're going to do the same thing for you. So this is the trickle up effect that'll never trickle back down, but you're going to basically go out and fish and give us the juice so we can give it to our pro team that's fishing in the biggest event of the year, the Major League Fishing Red Crest or the Bassmaster Classic. And it would get to the point to where the best guides in the world would sell their information to the best anglers in the world. You wouldn't have access to that information as a peon. And I'm going to tell you how this works. This would be exactly like the way songwriting works in Nashville. If you're a really good singer, songwriters want to get their songs to you. So the better singers get the best songs, so therefore they've got the best writing, or they write them themselves. But the only difference is in this game, you wouldn't be able to write the song yourself because you would be at such a competitive disadvantage that it would be a free-for-all. So if you had a no information rule, and we tried it in kayak fishing in the beginning, and it was a crap show because the perception is, man, I can't even compete with all of those guys that are in this big network of information, right? I'm not telling you it might happen. I am telling you that if they got rid of the no information rule, it would take 3 or 4 or 5 years, but there would be the haves and then the have-nots, and it would stay that way. And you would only get into that bubble if you got anointed in. And if you were fishing at a lower level, you would almost be pressured to give information to the bigger pros because of your sponsorship, because those sponsors want those wins, because they want the eyeballs and the notoriety and the sales that come along with it. And that would be how the machine would work. And if you think that's BS, you just don't know how this sport works. You also don't understand human nature. And you haven't been around long enough to have seen this happen before they came up with the no information rule 17, 18 years ago, when there were people who could come in and buy their way to a classic win, buy their way to qualifying for the elites faster than other people could. And then more importantly, you got spot sitters and you got people that go out there and relay information. I'm just telling you, it would be it would be worse than steroids in baseball. At least in steroids in baseball, if everybody's on it, it's a level playing field and everybody has access to it. If you did the no information rule in today's age, it would be like steroids in baseball, but there would be one steroid dealer and he would only deal to the highest bidder. And that's the problem with going with the no information rule. There would be 1 to 5 steroid dealers and they would only deal to the highest bidder. Yeah. And the younger people, the newer people, the less super established people wouldn't even have a shot at that song. Back to my songwriting analogy. So the best would get the best and stay the best, and we'd create this massive gulf.
And there would never be an opportunity for that secondary to become and take the number one spot, because those guys are never going. If they keep winning, they're going to like the money, they're going to like the power, they're going to like the fame. They're never going to step down.
They'd have to age out.
Yeah.
Until the sponsors decide who the next up and coming.
And you get anointed, ha ha ha, with the little crown, the little wand on the shoulder, and then you get to decide. And it wouldn't be about a meritocracy where you earned it. It would be more of a
money.
It'd be a money thing.
All money.
We would decide, how marketable is Seth? Is it worth bringing him in and giving him the information? It'd be like Dr. Evil. Look, I need the information. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it would become such a shit show that it would be even more unbearable than it is now. Here's the problem right now. The information rule became an issue last year because they tried to get rid of it. So if you want to know what no information rule looks like, they said, hey, we're done. 4 days it lasted, and the anglers mutinied. They said, bullshit. Oh,
I did not know that.
No. Yeah. If you got your finger on the pulse of what's going on, they tried to go the no information rule, period. And the anglers mutinied. Oh, no. They shut that down. They got the tournament directors and the leadership and said, we got to put this back. We can have a discussion about it in the future, but it can't be just to kick the doors open. So the competitors have spoken. They said, no, we don't want steroids because we don't want to be forced to use them. There's a difference between if you're allowed to use them and if you're forced to use them. Does that make sense? That's what would happen if you didn't have an information rule. That's what would happen if you said, oh, just kick the doors open and make it wide open. You can get as much information as you want.
It would essentially just be ran by which company has the most money.
And if you think your local lake gets beat up when a tournament's happening, imagine if there was
team of
3
30 rolled in from a
rolls of scouts coming in trying to get information to sell to tournament anglers. It would be ridiculous.
There'd be businesses that literally just
100%.
Scout. Yeah.
100%.
And who has the best scouting business? 100%. It's wild. So what is happening right now? The conversation's coming to the forefront. Scott Martin seems to be the one that's in the news a lot. I'm sure there's others. Formal protest. This is the second time on a protest? Yeah. And he's just like, hey, he's bowing out. And there's a lot of chatter on the internet right now.
Yeah. So as a guy who's run as many, if not more, tournaments than any tournament director working for Bassmaster right now, I think the only person that I know that's run more tournaments is probably a guy that directs the BFL, a gentleman that's the former president of FLW, now president of Major League Fishing, Kathy Fennell. Her son probably has run more tournaments than me, right? Might be 2 or 3 other ones out there that I'm overlooking. Trip Weldon from Bass and Lisa from Bass and all them, they have as well. But from a layperson standpoint, just from running tournaments, I've run a buttload. And if you have a polygraph rule, you coordinate the polygrapher. That polygrapher registers with the local law enforcement that they're going to be conducting the polygraph. That's the polygraph you sign up for and say that you're taking. And then the reason for that is, and I'm going to throw a little shade on what's going on. One, Scott Martin did not self-report. Bass should have never tried to play the damage control of saying that he self-reported. I don't know if the video of it will ever come to light, but there's a video out there. And if you're in the circle, you've seen it and it ain't self-reporting. They should have never spun it. It's more like I call Seth, hey man, I got you dead to rights stealing from the company. I can either fire you or you can quit. Seth's like, I quit. That's not self-reporting. Hey man, I stole from the company the other day and I just wanted to come clean. It's like, you got caught dead to rights. What you want to do? Can I self-report? Hey, do we want to let Scott self-report since he has 795,000 followers on YouTube and 350,000? Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's do that. Let him self-report.
Then they did damage control on Bassmaster.
Damage control. Then you bring on, I think the best thing that anybody's done is Dave Mercer did the unofficially official podcast and brought on a bunch of pros, and every one of them said, yeah, he didn't self-report. Fast forward to the next incident. The angler that people are saying, oh, who's the rat? The person that did it's not a rat. They are a competitor who is duty bound to report it. If they don't, they can get banned. Now,
I did not know that.
Now, here's because nobody knows who it is, and nobody should know who it is. It's kind of like the whistleblower thing. If you don't have some protection for tournament anglers to come forward and say, hey, I look into this, then you should not, you know, that person, people will never come forward because they don't want the public ridicule. Because in today's age, and especially, you're guilty until proven innocent, and you're vilified, just like people calling them a rat. That person's duty bound to report it. They're not a rat. They're following the rules. In addition to that, and I hate to say this because I like Scott. I've known Scott for a number of years. We've had similar sponsors before. I fished on the Scott Martin Challenge, like season 2 or 3 or whatever it was. And I genuinely do like Scott. But he says in the video, hey, I passed a polygraph. He didn't say he passed the polygraph.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I passed a polygraph. So here's the problem with being allowed to take your own. I can go book 6 and I'll make them all sign an NDA. And then if I pass one, I get to go, oh, look, I passed one. Well, what about the other ones you failed? So that's the biggest problem with that angle. The other biggest problem is in the same thing. He said, I barely knew that person, but then later said, but I gave him the juice on Kentucky Lake. He said juice 5 or 6 times.
Yep.
So if you barely
gave him coordinates and everything.
If you barely knew him and you didn't have a quid pro quo, for you people out there that don't know what that means and have only heard it in political discussion, that means a thing for a thing, quid pro quo. If you didn't have a quid pro quo, what did you give him the juice on Kentucky Lake for? What did you reciprocate with waypoints and all that other stuff for? And then more importantly, all the way back to these, I see a lot of morons on the internet saying, what's the difference if he gets a lake above it and a river below it and all? It's because you're getting a competitive advantage, because you're finding out what rivers similar to that river are doing so that you can start to formulate. And here's the other question that I don't see anybody asking. Well, if knowing what those rivers was doing was irrelevant, then why the hell did he ask it? Why were you soliciting information on those 2 rivers above and below the river that you're fishing if it didn't matter? So it's all bullshit. This is why you don't cover stuff up. This is why you're transparent.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it looks like a black eye for bass fishing. Really, it's not. It's that we're finally having a scenario where anglers are being held accountable. And it just so happens that it's a track record. And when that angler's already got some clout around his name or some smoke around his name, and you're a guy that's got a little hot piece of coal burning in your chest, you're going to say something. Because you're like, oh, man, if I got polygraphed right now, I could not pass the polygraph because of what I told him.
There you go.
Yeah, and Scott Martin, supposedly he has a history of doing things like this before there was a no information rule.
And again,
to the other elite anglers, not me.
That's why there's so much animosity. That's why there's resentment. But there's a history of it. And then there's a history of kind of like, I don't want to say threatening behavior, but like, hey, listen, unless you have all your ducks in a row, I wouldn't make this claim against me because I'm going to take this to the court of public opinion. And other organizations kind of were smaller, said, Bass is big enough to weather the storm. I think that's the problem. And I think that the one thing that should be the takeaway is that it's a level playing field. And even the most popular, most followed, most likely to do you reciprocal damage if he wanted to, pro is being held to the highest standard. Yeah. Kevin Van Dam might be the only more popular angler in the world from the standpoint of name recognition than Scott Martin, because he's a generational angler. He's got the biggest social media following. He's even got a bigger following than Ben Milliken. And so from a standpoint of name recognition and notoriety, this thing that you would want to witch hunt that guy is BS. But you also can't erode the confidence of your other 100 anglers by saying, because of who he is, he can get away with it. Because if you do, the fabric's coming unwound, you know?
And Bass put him with a camera on day one, I believe, of the Bassmaster Classic. So, I mean, I believe he had a camera on day one, right?
I don't know for sure.
Classic. So if it's a witch hunt from not
There's
Bass,
no witch hunt.
Exactly. Why would they give him a camera on day one? I mean,
Scott's got some really good super fans. You know, the DQ from last year wasn't Bass. He put it on his YouTube video, and his editor didn't think about what he was showing was incriminating him, and some keen fans saw that and called it out, and they didn't have a choice. So that was self-incriminating, but not self-reporting. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Two different things. I got caught. Did you see the Seth Snyder interview?
Yeah.
That dude. Yeah, he really threw him under the bus on that one.
I mean, I don't know that he threw him under the bus in as much as he just said what.
Oh yeah, you're right. He told his thoughts on.
Well, he just said what the vast majority of anglers at that level are thinking, and I also think that Seth is relatively close to the source of the person. So that's the other problem.
Yeah.
Is Seth, yeah.
So Chad, do you in fact have 3 more minutes? Do you have to hop on another podcast right now, or can we?
I need to cut it as soon as I can, but within a few minutes of an hour. What we got left?
I don't know. You're not going to pay attention to time. I'm not going to make you go off my podcast. Last question. Thought. We didn't even get to the theme of the show tonight. I mean, I literally got to go to YouTube and like change the title and everything on it. Nonetheless, we're talking about the future of kind of kayak design, tariffs,
I can finish this.
Market share. Yeah.
In everything, pendulum swing, right? And I think that the pendulum is pretty far to the right on what we're making as far as how big vessels can be and still be even borderline kayak fishing. People have to remember, we're not kayakers, we're kayak fishermen. So this is not a kayak, it's a fishing kayak. I think that we're there. I did the spoof video on the XTR 160. I couldn't believe people even believed it. I thought I had enough kind of like tongue in cheek and a little bit of winky wink that you would just figure it out. But apparently a lot of people believed it, including some of the dealers and reps, and people got pissed off at me and said, costing themselves. But I think that where we're at now is we're, from an infrastructure standpoint, we've got the airplane we're going to fly. We're going to work on the cockpit now, the configuration now, those kind of things. I think it's from as far as performance and that kind of thing. The next thing is better cockpit configurations, better modularity, better interoperability. I think the next frontier is trim of motors. Imagine bass boats that had a motor fixed to the back of it and it just sit in one position and they're like, whoa, and they're driving around like this and they couldn't break over. That's what we've been doing in kayak fishing the whole time. We're just driving like this. So the next thing is planing holes and trim tabs and, to change the hull performance and actual trimmable motors in the fore and aft, the up and down, and then the angle of attack axis. In fact, I know so because I'm working on it. That being said, that's the next evolution in the space we're in on the upper end of the market. And then I think that the pendulum has to swing back to better, more affordable entry-level boats, especially since wherever you fall on the tariff thing, I think the tariff thing is going to be a big kick in the junk for some of this Alibaba stuff. Good, bad, or indifferent, it's going to be. But I also think it presents a huge opportunity for American-made manufacturers to rethink that entry-level gateway product and that $899 to $1,099 price point that's lighter, that's easier, that's configurable, that's, make it your own type thing. So I think we're going to see more refining at the upper end, and we're going to redefine the lower end with lighter boats that can paddle, that can motor. Pedals are going to become an option. You mark my words, you can screenshot this, clip it. 3, 4, 5 years from now, pedals, there will be pedal drive boats, but there'll be an option. You could buy it without the pedal drive, or you can add it if you want to. It won't be a factor of paying the pedal drive tax anymore. And I do think that there will be more entry-level boats over the next 3 to 5 years that are in that $1,000 to $1,500 range that have a lot more options. A lot of the stuff that's been developed in the better boats is going to kind of trickle down to make those boats even better at those price points. And then I think that things like trailers, transportation, carts, all of the tangential stuff to kayak fishing is going to get better. I honestly think we have hit kind of that upper threshold of what boat size should look like. Now it's about performance, outfitting, comfort, and you're already seeing it with some of the seats that people are putting on the kayaks and things like that. So I say it all the time, before you scrape your money together, stability, we're kind of maxed out on. Comfort, we're not. Riggability, we're not. Affordability, we're not. Performance, we're not. And then everything else, we're not. The only thing we've really hit is wide and stable. For all the other factors, we can refine and get better and better. And I honestly think that we've hit that point now where there's time to focus on better performance, improving existing models. You're going to see a Titan X that's a new version of the same boat. We're not going to keep seeing these new all the time. I just don't think. I think you're going to see a new pro angler when Hobie finally gets their shit together. I think you're going to continue to see New Canoe come out with a boat about every 5 or 6 years like they've done historically. And then I think everybody else is just going to slowly but surely get more efficient. But mark my words, trim and the ability to maximize performance of motors, bow and stern, is on the horizon. And if we're having this conversation this time next year, it'll be like, how did we ever live without it?
No, I hear you. 160 live right now. Please help hit that like button if you're listening in. Chad, you mentioned Hobie. Did they find a buyer? Also,
I have no idea.
No clue.
I've heard every rumor you guys have heard, and maybe some you haven't. And none of the ones that you haven't are any more reliable than the ones that you have. So I'll probably know 15 minutes before everybody else knows. That's the amount of cloud I got in that space. It's like, yes, I'll probably know, but only a little bit.
Confluence? Anything there?
I've heard who bid on it. I haven't heard anything as far as what the next steps are. I heard there was a bid. I heard there was a consideration, and I've never heard if the bid moved out of the receive phase.
All right.
I know it hasn't progressed to due diligence. I can tell you that.
Got it. Well, folks, Chad, thank you for condensing this into an hour. That was a lot of fun. I like that.
I had fun. Now I get to go over here and talk smack about Jay Suvak because we've got to go head to head. And unfortunately, he's just the guy over there. I think the Shack Off Awards thing is huge. You guys do me a favor. Head over to my Facebook page. I'm going to post a link there to the Yak Off Awards. I'm not even going to ask you to go vote for me. I'm going to ask you to go vote for one of us. And you can do it every day from now until Sunday. And the reason for that is, the Kayak Angler magazine is now owned by a massive digital brand, and they are investing in this. So I can only see this getting bigger and better and offering more opportunities. And there's huge opportunities for the people who are voting for these crazy prize packages, even more so than the guys that are in the competition.
Right.
Rightfully so. So do me a favor, vote every day, vote for whoever you want to see win, but at least vote, and maybe vote for me one day and Jake the next, and alternate. Do the math on which way I end up with the most votes and vote that way. So, I'll end the show with saying this. I want to win on the merit of actually beating Jay fair and square based on the merit of the kayak. What I don't want to do is I don't want to win just because he was one of the guys
there he is
that stood there and didn't say anything. And while this charter captain was being mean to that poor kid, he's on there bass fishing in saltwater. How insensitive was that guy, right?
Hack
so
job.
Go vote for your boy, because we don't want a guy that's just going to stand by as some 23-year-old young kid just gets. He was the closest one to the captain. He had every opportunity. He could have smacked him with one of them bass. You know what I'm saying?
Could have pulled him back. Yeah, I don't. That guy's not getting my vote.
If you had to vote for human
dignity,
I would have belly bumped that guy off the boat and took over myself.
Keep in mind, not only do you get points for voting, if you get like 10 entries for subscribing to this, 10 entries for going to this website, 5 entries for doing this. So I've been stacking them up. I want to win. I want to win a kayak.
Let me finish my podcast with those guys after this and give me about 45 minutes, and it'll be on my Facebook page. Y'all can go start voting.
Thank you, Chad, so much. Hey, everyone, we'll be back next Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern on the Kayak Fishing with Seth podcast. Chad, you rock. Seth, thank you so
guys.
much. Everyone else, thanks for
Good night.
listening in. You have a good one.